Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and our program, Get to Know. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my co-host and partner in crime, Kathleen Antrim.
Thanks, Doug. It is great to be here today. We have a treat for you. We have best-selling author. He also makes movies, John Gaspard. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Great to meet both of you.
We're looking forward to getting to know you a little bit here. So I have a question about your childhood.
Okay. Can I lie down on the couch here for a second?
Please.
We can really dig in.
So, do you think there was aspects of your childhood that led you to be creative, that led you to be a writer? Were you a shy child? Were you outgoing? Did you have imaginary friends? What do you think might have contributed to this career?
A couple things. One, I was the seventh out of what ultimately became 8 children, but I was the seventh. I was the youngest for 10 years. So I had a lot of parents. I had a lot of older kids who were looking after me. And my parents were tired at that point of strictures. So I kind of ran free. When I was about 13, I had an uncle who lived in Hawaii, who was a priest in Hawaii and came home to retire. Why he would retire in Minnesota, I have no idea. If you're in Hawaii, I mean, stay.
Just sick of the beautiful beaches.
I guess so. It just gets boring. He handed off to me a regular 8 movie camera, which was regular 8 film is 16 millimeter film that's just been cut right down the middle. So if you have a 30-foot roll, you get 60 feet in regular 8, and it's a wind-up camera. And I started making movies, and that was fun. But one of the things I learned very quickly is when you're making a movie, you need a script. You particularly need a script when you are dealing with a film cartridge that is 3.5 minutes long and no more. So you've got to know what your story is, or you're just going to run out of film before the end, because editing was difficult. So I started writing scripts in order to have something to shoot. And
how old were you?
I'm 12, 13 at that point. Okay. So I'm setting up G.I. Joes in the backyard and animating them as they fight and they burst into flames, because that happens sometimes with G.I. Joes. And then I was very lucky. I got into a film program while in high school that you spent half the day in a normal high school and half the day with a bunch of kids your own age who were being taught by young filmmakers how to make films. And we had unlimited film and unlimited equipment. Needless to say, this program didn't last very long, but while it lasted, I was there and I was able to make films, more and more films. And again, had to write in order to have something to shoot. And then sound all of a sudden came into our world. We hadn't had it before. And so now I had to write dialogue. So I'm writing scripts and shooting them and seeing how it works. And everything just grew out of that. It was just, my uncle handed me a camera. I started goofing around, and before you know it, I'm shooting feature-length movies in Super 8 and traveling to California and Toronto to show them at festivals and things. It was just a weird, but I can see where it all started. I don't think if he hadn't handed me that camera, I don't think it would have happened.
So what made you decide to go into writing books?
Well, there is a book that I read while a very young filmmaker. I was probably 19, and it was called Breaking Through, Selling Out, and Dropping Dead and Other Notes on Filmmaking by a filmmaker named William Bayer. And he laid out the film industry in a very interesting kind of almost a dictionary style format, but it was also kind of a diary. And everything you needed to learn about the film industry was in this little book. And then a couple of years later, he put out a revised version of it in which he added little footnotes. And he ended it by saying, the film business has driven me crazy. I can't get the things done I want to do. I'm going to write novels. And that's what he did until he died. And he wrote a lot of thriller novels, and he was very happy doing that. And so I kind of put that in the back of my mind that as I got older, if filmmaking was too hard, took up too much time, I didn't have the energy, I could always write novels. And that's what I started to do. So while I was making the last couple features that I made, I think 6 or 7 ultra low budget features, I was also starting a series on the side. And as I aged out of filmmaking, because it is a very tiring thing to do, particularly if you're doing it for no money. So you're doing a lot of the stuff all by yourself. You're kind of a one-man band. And I found that I was getting the same pleasure out of writing the book. So I just switched over, started writing the Eli Marks series, and 9 books later, there we are.
Wow. That's
Tell
so
us
cool.
about Eli.
Yeah.
Well, Eli in
Adorable
his
cover.
original,
Yeah, I love it.
thank
Yeah.
you. That's Eli at age 13. That's a pretty new focus on him. When we first meet Eli in the first book of the 9-book cozy mystery series, which is called The Ambitious Card, he's in his early 30s. He's divorced. He's essentially living in his teenage bedroom in above the magic store that his uncle runs, which is where he was raised. And because he's a magician, he has a weird way of looking at things. If you've ever met any magicians, they have just a weird way of looking at things. And it proves to be helpful when stumbling upon a crime, that he has a magician's way of looking how something might have been done. So I did that for 9 books. And then a couple of years ago, I had the idea of it'd be fun to see what he was like at age 13. We sort of touched on it in the 9 books about what life was like 20 years before, but we hadn't delved into it. And so that turned into The Curious Mysteries of Eli Marks, which is for middle grade readers, although older kids have enjoyed it as well. It has 10 chapters in it. And in those 10 chapters, we learn about Eli arriving at a new junior high when he moves in with his uncle and his aunt, and what life is like for that first year of junior high as he is acclimating to that, and also learning magic from his uncle. And as it turns out, in each chapter, he's solving a mystery. So I'm probably dating myself, but the Encyclopedia Brown books that I read as a kid had a similar format where in Donald Sobel, who wrote those books, his version, you'd get to the end of the chapter and Encyclopedia would say, no, Bugs Meany, you did it because, and then you had to turn to the back of the book and there would be the answer as to how he had solved the crime. I didn't want to do that because I thought it was sort of a cheat, because you never really learned how that portion of the story ended. So in these 10 stories, when each time you hit a mystery, there's a big question mark on the page. The reader can think about it for a little bit, turn the page, get the answer, and then the chapter's ended. It's wrapped up a little bit better. And then at the end of that book, they can learn the 10 magic tricks that Eli is learning during the course of his year with his uncle. And having spoken to a lot of kids, particularly I recently did a middle grade classroom visit, and a lot of the kids had already started learning the magic tricks and were enjoying that portion of it, as well as solving the mysteries. So that's Eli.
Oh, wow.
He's age 13 in that book, and he's age 33 to like 37 in the other books.
Yeah, I was one of those kids that had the little magic kit when I was growing up too, and tried to do, the magic with a watch that would hold the stupid stuff way back from the 50s. But because I'm old, I'm assuming Eli uses magic in the solution of these crimes. Can you give us an example of like a magic trick that he employs?
Well, Doug, it's not so much using an actual trick. It's taking the methodology that he uses as a magician and applying it to the situation. For example,
Okay.
in magic, there's you often want to create a spatial distance between where you are and where you did the actual dirty work in the magic trick. So you don't want the audience to see you do it, and so you make sure there's distance between you and that. Or there's what's called time misdirection, where you think something is happening at this point, but it's already happened. Or there's a thing called the instant stooge, where an audience member is working with you, but the rest of the audience doesn't know it. There's all sorts of sleight of hand things where it's the idea of making you look here instead of there. And that's what a lot of crimes are that he deals with are, they wanted us to look at this portion of the room, but in fact, what's really happening is over there. So he isn't using magic tricks per se, but he is using the thinking. And that's one of the things that, a lot of magicians read the books. Not all magicians read them, but only those who are interested in mysteries. But they like the fact that I'm not giving away any magic tricks, but I'm telling enough that the reader gets a sense of what's going on. In fact, I got the greatest compliment I can get, and probably should have retired at that point. I got an email from Teller of Penn and Teller, who had read one of the books, and he said, I really enjoyed the book. Most people in writing about the life of a magician get all the details wrong. You got the details right. And by the way, I thought the killer was X. It turned out to be Y. So you fooled me there. So I never fooled Penn and Teller, but I did fool Teller, which is half the battle.
That is so cool. Oh
Yeah,
my
so it's,
God,
you
fun.
know, a cozy mystery reader isn't going to get lost in the jargon. That's not going to happen. It's a completely fair, cozy mystery that just is looking at it through the point of view of someone who has an interesting profession.
Cool.
Very cool. Yeah.
Well, you have something new coming out in Eli's world. Um, Tell us about these novellas.
Yes.
Yeah, the ninth book in the series, well, the eighth book ended up being was written during the pandemic, was 10 short stories. I wanted to challenge myself because in mystery writing, the hardest thing for me is coming up with the mystery, which is kind of the most important thing in the book. And so I wanted to challenge myself to do it 10 times. So that's book number 8, called The Self-Working Trick. And then I had ideas for 3 stories that weren't short stories, but if I'd done them as novels, they would have been sort of padded out, and I don't ever want to do that. So I just decided to put them together as one book, The Professor's Nightmare and Other Stories. It's 3 different things that Eli's dealing with, but they kind of interlink a little bit because it's the continuation of Eli's story, which is every book, things are a little different in his life. He's got a girlfriend, or he's gotten married, or he's taken over the magic store, or on and on. So it continues the story just with 3 mysteries instead of 1.
Cool.
And what are you working on currently?
Well, oh dear. I put out a book during COVID called The Popcorn Principles, which it was because I've made movies and I also write novels. When I end up at a writing convention or on a writing podcast, there's a couple different areas they want me to talk about. One is, you know, having a magician as your main character when you yourself are not a magician, or how do you use what you learned as a screenwriter in novel writing. So I had taken a lot of notes on that and came up with about 25 techniques that I was using or that I discovered from interviews with other filmmakers, because I've written a couple of filmmaking books that have a lot of interviews with people like George Romero, who did Night of the Living Dead, or Steven Soderbergh, or Jon Favreau, or Roger Corman. I've interviewed all these people. So I just took those techniques and I put them into a book called The Popcorn Principles. And then I realized that I had another 25. So I did what's called the sequel, The Popcorn Principles, the sequel. And one of the things that people said to me after reading it was, we'd love that at the end of each of these little chapters on a technique that you gave us some kind of writing prompts, but we want more writing prompts. So the third book in the series is called The Popcorn Principles Unleashed. It's a workbook in which I sort of recap, each chapter recaps a key component of screenwriting and then offers 5 to 10 different prompts that you as a writer can try out for your own work. So for example, if we're talking about the skill of getting exposition across in dialogue, an example I would use would be there's a scene in the movie Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman and Sidney Pollack where the actor Dustin Hoffman is talking to his agent, and that particular scene is a masterclass in how do you get exposition across in an interesting way, because it's an argument and it's funny and it's fast, and you learn everything you need to know about that relationship and what's going to drive this character forward. And so then we kind of recap that, and then there'd be like 5 or 10 different little prompts to say, look at your chapter and try this. Look at, is your dialogue doing that? And it's, you know, everyone's mileage will vary. You might be at a different point in your career, and you'll use all of them. You might just use it as sort of a spark to go, let me just look at some of these questions and see if I'm doing that. Am I cutting out the shoe leather and getting rid of all the stuff that people skip over? Am I doing that? Because you have to do that in screenwriting. You can't have shot after shot after shot of someone going somewhere unless there's something else happening. I remember talking to a film editor once, and we were talking filmmaking, but this also applies to novel writing, where he said, if you have a big crane shot where your camera starts up way up high and you come down and you swoop down and you land on 2 characters and they start talking, I can guarantee you that as an editor, I'm going to cut everything until they start talking, because it's just wasted time. We need to get to it. And that's something that we sometimes fall into when we're writing our novels, is we're so caught up in how cleverly we're writing about the snowscape before us and the way the weather is, blah, 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 blah. And then finally, after a page and a half, something happens. Well, that's where it should really be starting, is a page and a half in. And that's a screenwriting technique that sometimes you can't see it in your own writing, but if you see it somewhere else, you go, oh, I see how that's happening.
Mhm.
And then you can apply it to your own work.
So do you think that's like the number one, there was like one takeaway from these books for novelists? Do you think that's like the number one thing that you would recommend? Like start there if you're just, putting pen to paper for the beginning.
Yeah. In the last chapter of this last Popcorn Principles book, Popcorn Principles Unleashed, it's a chapter that says, if you're not going to do anything else, do this. And the prompts take you through sharpening your dialogue and getting rid of shoe leather, getting rid of stuff that you don't need, and finding a way to really tighten, because very rarely when I'm editing something I've written, do I add things. Normally I'm cutting things away, and unless I screwed up and forgot to say something in it. And that's the thing that is going to make your novel more readable and more engaging, is let's just cut and make it the very best thing. The TV writer and screenwriter Aaron Sorkin has a rule which I've used to some great effect, which is when he's done with a script, he will go through, and at the end of each scene, he will cut the last line. And
Interesting.
he realizes that he really didn't need that last line.
I did not know that.
The
Wow.
audience will take one, and they'll get two all by themselves. You don't have to give them two. And it's hard to see that in our own writing, which is why looking at how movies do it, makes it so much easier to go, oh, I see what they did there. What's my version of that? How can I make that work in what I'm doing right now?
Well, one of Elmore Leonard's principles is don't start with the weather. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people have taken that literally. I think what he really means is exactly what you're saying, is don't start with a lot of fluff. In other words, come early, come late, leave early. On each scene. I think that's what Elmore was saying.
He said, don't write the stuff that people skip over.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's something, the simplest thing you can do is take something you've written, sit down and start to read it. Don't read it out loud, just read it. And if you feel your eye jumping ahead to the next paragraph, because the reader's going to do that too. If it's not interesting enough for you who wrote it to read it, it's got to go.
Exactly. Well, we interviewed our friend Lee Goldberg, who of course came from television and now is into novels and all that. And he said he basically, when he has a book idea, he'll just write the screenplay.
Yeah.
And then he'll write the novel from that, because that's his outline, because he understands the compactness and the economy that must be in a screenplay, and then it makes the novel tighter. And I thought, what a fascinating concept.
Yeah, it really is.
It makes perfect sense. And it's obviously works, because he's very good at doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. Absolutely. So it's the Popcorn Principles Unleashed is your current book. Are you looking ahead to anything else that you've got noodling in your brain, or are you taking a little break right now?
Well, I'm always doing something. There's always something. That's the thing when you're a self-published author, is there isn't a moment in the day when there isn't something you could be doing.
Sure.
And then it's just a question of figuring out, what do you really need to do? One of the things that I've been working on lately, and we're going to start doing it on a more consistent basis, is, I was very lucky for the Eli Marks series, that I have a friend who is a professional narrator. And he said, let's do these as audiobooks. And so he did all the audiobooks, and he's terrific at it. He gets accolades about his reading, and it is a better experience listening to him read the book than for anyone to read it. I think he's just that good. And together we went on and we were doing a podcast in which every episode you get to hear one of those chapters. And then we also interview guests having to do with it. But the audiobooks are so popular that I took a couple of the short stories and using his existing narration. I worked with a composer and a sound designer, and we turned a couple of the short stories into kind of radio plays, sort of. He still does all the voices, but you've got music and sound effects, and it really just elevates it. It makes it a much more involving and engaging experience. And there are a number of the stories that I want to sit down and do that with and put that out as just its own little unique audiobook. Here's, 5 Eli Marks mysteries that have been enhanced with music and sound effects. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Cool.
Very, very cool. So now where can our viewers get your books?
They can get them, well, they're everywhere, mostly. They are currently in, ebooks are in KU on Amazon, but the paperbacks are everywhere. And you can also buy stuff directly from me at elimarksmysteries.com. Or if you just want to listen to them for free, just go to the podcast behind the page, the Eli Marks Podcast. We are in year 4, so we're 4 books in. And in addition to hearing an entire book over the course of a 24-episode season, you also hear interviews with people who are either involved in magic or involved in entertainment or involved in all kinds of things. Teller of Penn and Teller was a recent guest. Dick Cavett has been a guest. We've had the amazing Kreskin come on. So it's a fun way to get into the series, and it doesn't cost anything, which is
how cool. Well, John Gaspard, thank you so much for being a guest. You're really fabulous. Very interesting. It's fun to have somebody on with, kind of a different take on things. So
fascinating. And thanks to Michael Varma for introducing us.
Yes. So thank you so much.
Yes.
We'll have to have you back. Keep us posted on what you've got going on and coming up, so that we can have you back to talk about that. I'm also going to ask our viewers to please click the thumbs up. That helps with the algorithms and gets the interviews out. And please subscribe so we can bring more of these interviews to you. And check out Outliers Writing University at www.outlierswritinguniversity.com, where Doug and I both teach. And we have all kinds of best-selling authors, all best-selling authors, teaching all the various aspects of craft. Anything else, Doug?
No, thank you, John. This has been fascinating. You have a great career. I mean, it's just interesting stuff.
Very.
And we look forward to chatting with you again down the road.
That sounds great. Thanks, both of you.
All right. Take care. Until next time, this has been Get to Know on the Outliers YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time.